I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We are going to begin this morning with the countdown to a government shutdown. So top congressional leaders from both sides of the aisle, they left a high-stakes meeting with President Trump yesterday. This was without a deal, though. They have until midnight tonight to reach an agreement or face that partial shutdown. It could end up leaving millions of federal workers without pay and cause disruptions to government programs and services.
Senate Republicans need at least 8 votes from Democrats to pass a funding bill. Democrats are using leverage to demand the extension of Obamacare funding. They also want to reverse cuts to Medicaid that were just made under President Trump's sweeping domestic agenda bill. Well, both sides called yesterday's meeting a frank and direct discussion. They ultimately walked away without a breakthrough.
We want to work across the aisle to make sure that people have access to good health care. We are not going to let Democrats shut down the government, take a hostage unless we give them everything that they want. That's not how the people's government has ever worked. That's certainly not how it's going to work under the Trump administration.
Democrats are fighting to protect the health care of the American people. And we are not going to support a partisan Republican spending bill that continues to gut the health care of everyday Americans.
NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung is standing by with more on what a shutdown could actually look like if we get there. First, let's go to our Capitol Hill correspondent, Melanie Zanona, for the latest on these negotiations. Mel, good morning. So this was really the first time President Trump heard from Democrats directly about these health care issues. For Dems, that's the main sticking point, preventing them from backing any sort of stopgap funding measure. What are you hearing about what happened in this meeting yesterday?
Yeah, good morning, guys. This was a spirited meeting by all accounts. And Jeffries and Schumer really walked into that meeting with a goal in mind, and that was to drill down on the idea that Obamacare subsidies, which are expiring at the end of this year, are going to cause premiums to skyrocket for millions of Americans if they don't act prior to that expiration date. And according to the Democratic leaders, they said that Trump was actually surprised to learn that information, and they implied that he was actually more willing to cut a deal in this space than perhaps the GOP leadership was. But after the meeting, both Mike Johnson and John Thune insisted they are on the same page with Trump and that they will not negotiate any sort of health care deal until Democrats fund the government first, essentially accusing Democrats of trying to take government funding hostage for their health care demands. So that is where we're at on this deadline, with this deadline approaching later tonight.
So, Mel, Republican Speaker Mike Johnson held a conference call with House Republicans yesterday. We should note, not in session this week. They're back in their home districts. Tell us a little bit more about what the Republican side is saying about that particular health care piece that's sort of stopping this on the Democratic side and ultimately the very real potential of a shutdown.
Yeah, so I talked to multiple sources that were on the call, and the message to members from the GOP leadership was do not focus your talking points on health care, because Republicans said that is actually where they believe they lose the argument. They said instead, Republican members should be focusing on the potential negative economic consequences of a shutdown, because they are confident that ultimately Democrats will get the blame for those economic impacts and stressors. Now, I will say for the most part, Republicans have been really unified in their shutdown strategy. But there were some Republicans who complained on that call about the fact that they are not in Washington, D.C. right now, as you pointed out, which has enabled Democrats, who very much are here, to really gain the spotlight and take over the stage. They've been having multiple press conferences, doing tons of TV interviews since they've been in the Capitol yesterday. So far, though, there are no signs that Republican leadership plan to bring their member back early. They're scheduled to come back next week. We'll see if that changes, though.
You know, Mel, just hours after this meeting yesterday, President Trump posted a fake AI-generated video appearing to troll leaders Schumer and Jeffries using racist tropes about Latinos. There's a screenshot of it on the screen right there. How are they responding? And with that in mind, where do things go from here?
Well, both of them really brushed it off and dismissed it, and they responded in kind on social media. Schumer suggested that Trump thinks a shutdown is a, quote, joke. And then Jeffries tweeted a picture of Trump next to Jeffrey Epstein with the caption, "This is real." So not a good sign on the eve of a shutdown for the idea that everyone's going to come together and make a deal. But they will have one more shot today in the Senate to keep the government open. The GOP leadership is planning to put that House-passed GOP stopgap spending bill on the floor. Right now, though, they do not have the votes to pass it, guys.
All right, Mel, thank you.
Now let's get to NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung at the big board to break down the potential impacts of a government shutdown here. Brian, good morning. So what could the shutdown shut down? Let's start there.
Yeah, well, good morning. So this would cover a wide range of different sort of the government services that kind of you and I deal with on a daily basis. If you are a federal worker, of course, this is the biggest deal for you because this could result in paycheck delays for you. If you're furloughed, you might even have to work without pay for a period of time. But also there are a number of other things that we're watching for, like, for example, government data delays. So there's a big jobs report that's due from the Bureau of Labor Statistics just on Friday of this week. It's going to tell us about the health of the economy in the month of September. We might not get the report if the Bureau of Labor Statistics is closed because of this shutdown. And then lastly, national parks and museums. If you were hoping to go to a national park this weekend, if there is a shutdown tonight into tomorrow, well, then that might be shuttered. These are the types of things that could be impacting regular people as a result of the shutdown if there is no resolution by midnight.
It would not be a total government shutdown. So what are the programs that do keep operating even if we do see a shutdown?
Yeah, there are some critical programs that will still remain perfectly untouched as a result, even if there is a shutdown. Think about things like Social Security, Medicare, ICE, and also Customs and Border Protection. They'll continue to collect tariffs and also patrol the border, so that continues uninterrupted. There are a few other things here, like the U.S. Postal Service, that would not be impacted, but there are some things here that kind of have an asterisk on them. One example is Veterans Affairs. It would be a partial shutdown because a lot of health care from the VA would still be available, but any sort of new enrollees would be impacted. Air traffic control and TSA on paper is also not impacted. But interestingly, in previous episodes of shutdowns, we've seen situations where workers that were not getting paid just decided not to show up, even though they were still essential. All it takes is a few people in an air traffic tower to not go into work to really choke up delays and, really cause havoc over at the airport. So that's something we might have to watch for as well.
No kidding. That's something that we've seen happen unrelated to a shutdown, but we know what that looks like a little bit more these days. Brian, what do we know about federal workers getting furloughed? What does this look like for them, this structure?
Okay, so there's a lot that kind of tells us this time might be different when it comes to the furloughs. But if you just look at the numbers of the departments that have outlined their plans, because they actually have to tell the government what their plans would be if there is the shutdown, you can see the tens of thousands of workers just at these four agencies. Of course, there are way more than this down in Washington, D.C. These are the potential furloughs that would be happening to the federal workers. But interestingly, you also have this new wrinkle where the head of the OMB, Russell Vought, has basically said they could also hand out what they call these RIF, reduction in force notices, to people that are furloughed or even outside of that the scope of the furloughs to basically reduce them and permanently remove them from the federal workforce. That could mean that these furloughs could turn into layoffs in numbers that might be comparable or might not be comparable to these tens of thousands. But that's a unique wrinkle to this shutdown as well.
You know, Brian, you know better than anyone, Wall Street likes predictability. It likes certainty. So what could a shutdown mean for the markets?
Okay, here's the thing. When we take a look at historical context, it actually really hasn't done all that much. If you take a look at the last three shutdowns in December 2018, before that, a 3-day shutdown in January of 2018, and the 16-day shutdown in October of 2013, markets, they went up in every single case. I mean, the longest one, the 34-day shutdown, the longest in American history, you actually saw markets go up by 10%. They're saying, in terms of market strategists, that it doesn't really matter. There were other stories behind why markets went up. In December 2018, it was expectations of a Federal Reserve rate cut. So at least on the market side of things, doesn't seem like there's too much worry about the impact of a shutdown.
How interesting. All right, Brian Chung, thank you so much.
In what appears to be an abrupt summoning from the Trump administration, hundreds of senior military officers are set to come together today. It is a rare joint meeting taking place at Marine Corps Base Quantico just outside of Washington.
The White House confirmed the meeting last week, which is being organized by Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. In a phone interview over the weekend with NBC News, President Trump revealed that he will also take part.
NBC News senior national security correspondent Courtney Cubie joins us now with a preview. Courtney, good morning. So there has just been a lot of speculation about what will be discussed during this all-hands meeting that was announced on short notice, since leaders are coming in from all around the world. We keep hearing this is rare. Does it usually happen? Some admirals and generals not informed beforehand just about the purpose, what it's all about. So do we know? What can we expect, and what role will the president play?
Yeah, and guys, this is really unprecedented in modern times, to bring together all of the United States military's senior leaders. So this is every general from 1-star to 4-star and every admiral also from 1-star to 4-star. We cannot find a time where this has happened again in modern times. So this is extremely uncommon in and of itself. Now, the topic of today's discussion and speech has changed over time. Last week, we were hearing a lot about how it was going to focus on the accomplishments that Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth was going to lay out, things that he says the department has accomplished under President Donald Trump. But then they were going to move into policies now and where the policies were going for the U.S. military in the future, specifically what's known as the National Defense Strategy. Now, recently, the NDS has been primarily focused on what they call near-peer competitors. So countries like China, Russia, who could potentially threaten the United States. But under Donald Trump, officials say that is going to shift to more of a focus on the homeland. But guys, now that President Trump is involved in this, it's not really clear how that's going to impact exactly what Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth says here today and what President Trump, what his message is going to be to the hundreds of assembled generals and admirals.
Courtney, you just said a moment ago, meetings like this are not common. We understand messages to top military officers. Tell us, a little bit more about this, but it's usually communicated by a memo or maybe a secure teleconference, not physically bringing everyone together in the same room. What are the security challenges of having all these people in the same place at the same time, and not to mention the places that they're leaving behind?
Yeah, the challenges are enormous. They've been busing these generals and these admirals from all over this area. We have people who've traveled here from as far away as Japan to be here. And what's remarkable about it is they were ordered to be here, and then they are ordered not to have any other additional meetings or events while they're in town. So literally they have been told to fly to the United States, fly to D.C., and then fly right back to their commands. And as you mentioned, Savannah, taking them away from sometimes extremely busy jobs. These are, in many cases, they are the commanders of a combatant command, of an area. Taking them away from their job for a day or two for this is extremely unusual. What's also become clear since the information or the news about this meeting first broke last week is that it's not going to be classified. They're going to live stream it. There's going to be a camera in there getting video of what Secretary Hegseth says, of what the president says. So all of this could have been communicated by a secure VTC or by a memo. And frankly, that's how this generally would be done.
We do plan to carry it here on NBC News Now, live as it's happening. So that echoes the point you just made there, Courtney. I know you've been working all of your sources to try and get a better idea of what people inside the armed services are saying about this meeting. What have you learned?
Yeah, there is a lot of concern behind the scenes among members of the military, and specifically a little bit more vocally from retired and former members of the military. Just the optics of this meeting. We talked at the top about how this is extremely rare, perhaps unprecedented. At least we've not been able to find an example of this in the United States in the past. But what it does echo is how other countries, specifically some of those competitors I mentioned, like China and Russia and others, they do have meetings like this where they have their senior military assembled to hear from the commander-in-chief, to hear from their secretary or minister of defense. And that's what's really causing concerns here is just the optics of this meeting, in addition to the logistics and the security concerns that go along with having hundreds of these people packed into an auditorium with the President of the United States addressing them.
All right. Courtney, thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, in legal news, YouTube has agreed to pay $24 million to settle a lawsuit brought by President Trump. The president sued YouTube. This was after his account was banned back in 2021 following the January 6th insurrection at the Capitol. At the time, YouTube said content on Mr. Trump's channel raised, quote, concerns about the ongoing potential for violence. The president's account was then reinstated in 2023. A notice of settlement for Mr. Trump's lawsuit against YouTube says that $22 million of it will go toward building a new White House ballroom. The payout is the latest in a growing list of settlements between tech and media companies, including Meta and Twitter and President Trump.
We're learning new details about the shooter in that horrific church attack in Michigan on Sunday. At least 4 people were killed. The shooter is also dead, killed by police. Now his family is speaking out. We get the latest from NBC's Maggie Vespa. She also spoke to a man who recently encountered the suspect, a meeting that may have revealed his motive.
From above in Grand Blanc, Michigan, investigators comb charred rubble looking for a motive in Sunday's attack on a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
The FBI is investigating this as an act of targeted violence.
Can you tell us who you believe the target was? A specific person, the LDS Church, another group?
As of right now, again, as this is an ongoing investigation, what I would say is when I say targeted violence, I mean targeted within our state and within our community.
Chris Johns has his own suspicions. He asked you, what do you think of Mormons?
Yes, that is his question.
Johns is running for city council in the area, and last week, while campaigning, says he drove up to the home of 40-year-old Thomas Jacob Sanford, who first asked him his views on guns, then Mormons, adding he dated a woman in Utah.
He said Mormons are the Antichrist, and he said it in a very matter-of-fact.
He said Mormons are the Antichrist.
Just like that. Deadpan, matter-of-fact.
Johns said Sanford remained calm. Days later, Johns saw his picture, identified as the gunman in Sunday's attack. Authorities now saying Sanford had multiple past arrests, including one for burglary. Chilling when you saw what happened?
Extremely.
In a statement to NBC News, the gunman's father writing, "We are devastated. We don't know what to think." Calling Sanford a Christian and a loving father, son, and husband. The statement adds he was a Marine, and we are completely in shock over this. We have no answers. Authorities say 4 are dead and 8 injured. The youngest person hurt, a 6-year-old child. When Sanford's truck crashed into the church, Paul Kirby, there with his family, ran to help.
I saw the gun and him starting to shoot, and I turned and ran, went back towards the doors. I got a little bit of shrapnel in my left leg.
You said you ran back in toward your family, just wanting to save your wife and kids.
Yeah, the scariest I've ever been.
Kirby says parishioners carried kids and the wounded out the back. Minutes later, the church going up in flames.
I am extremely lucky to be alive.
Maggie Vespa, NBC.
Well, that mass shooting in Michigan is just the latest episode in a wave of violence across the U.S. Over the weekend, a gunman opened fire at a waterfront bar in North Carolina, killing 3 people. NBC News national correspondent Aaron Gilchrist has the latest on that investigation and what some experts believe is fueling the bloodshed.
This waterfront bar, popular with tourists, the scene of another horrific mass shooting.
We're advising it's coming from a subject on the boat shooting into the building from the boat.
In court, prosecutors revealing they believe the suspect, 40-year-old Nigel Max Edge, intended to carry out the shooting at the American Fish Company in Southport on Friday night, but another passing boat interrupted his plan. Investigators say he returned the next day, opening fire from a boat just feet from the bar's deck, where dozens of people were listening to live music. Police calling the attack highly premeditated.
We heard one pop. I looked up thinking it was fireworks. The next thing you know, people were running around the corner to see the carnage. You never get that out of your head with somebody shot in the head and sitting there trying to console his wife with her husband dead right beside her.
Like the suspect in Michigan, Edge is a Marine Corps veteran and Purple Heart recipient who served in Iraq. Edge said he suffers from PTSD, according to the police chief.
One thing is clear. We must do more to prevent these acts of violence. It has to be our top priority.
There have now been 324 mass shootings in the U.S. this year. Experts say attacks motivated by both ideology and fame are on the rise.
Kind of becomes a bit of a snowball effect where there are more violent role models out there, and then those violent role models can inspire new copycat attacks by people who want to be like them.
The district attorney here says Edge did make some incriminating statements to investigators, but they did not offer any theories about a motive for the shooting.
All right, Aaron, thank you for that.
We're continuing to follow those 2 major storms churning off the eastern coast. They could create deadly rip currents from Florida to the Carolinas. Already powerful Hurricane Umberto and Tropical Storm Imelda have left a deadly path of destruction in the Caribbean. At least 1 person in Cuba was killed by landslides caused by Imelda's heavy rains. Hundreds of people have been evacuated across the island, with forecasters predicting the storms could drop up to 8 inches of rain in some areas.
And we are already starting to feel the effects from both of these, from Umberto and Imelda here in the United States. In South Florida, the strong winds are causing unusually large waves, which are attracting surfers and thrill seekers. But the possibility of deadly rip currents has rescue officials on high alert, posting no swimming zones and getting their gear ready in case the currents get too rough. Meanwhile,
the wave action is going to pick up. The wind action is going to be strong, usually out of the northeast, and it just gives us a lot of issues with rip currents.
Meanwhile, in the Carolinas, crews are bringing in construction equipment to prevent coastal erosion and the possibility of isolated flooding. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch is in Charleston, South Carolina, and has the latest on the conditions there.
Hey there, we could still be seeing some rough surf in Charleston into the weekend. There's also the risk of potentially rip currents here in South Carolina through today. We could see some showers and winds, and we got a little bit of a breeze right now. But bottom line, this is a cakewalk by comparison to what we could have been seeing, right? At one point into the weekend, this past weekend, we were looking at a potential landfall for a Hurricane Imelda here in the Charleston area. And then came that right hook into the open water, the force of Hurricane Umberto helping clear the way for the storm to move out into the open water away from the mainland U.S. Other parts of this broader region have not fared as well. The Bahamas was hit by this storm, and Imelda has turned deadly. According to Cuban state media, at least one person was killed in a landslide there. But coming back to the U.S., again, we were looking at potentially some coastal flooding as well, the rough beach conditions. But at the end of the day, really the worst of what we're seeing here in the Charleston area is this is not the week you want to be at the beach. So a sigh of relief. The state of emergency lifted in the state of South Carolina. We could be seeing again some showers, but right now it is clear. It is mostly clear, I should say. We're still waiting for the sun to come up. It is dry and it is breezy, but not that bad here in Charleston. Back to you.
All right, Jesse, thank you. Well, now let's bring in NBC meteorologist Angie Lassman.
Yeah, she's got the latest track on the storms for us. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning to you. Jesse said it. We've got some indirect impacts. We're going to still see us track these systems as they move farther away and kind of wind down those impacts. But for now, still dealing with some of that. We've still got Tropical Storm Imelda. We were expecting this system to intensify a little earlier today, but it looks like we'll wait until the afternoon hours for it to likely become a hurricane. So we'll still see that on the table. And then, of course, Hurricane Umberto is doing the opposite. It is weakening. Now, both of these are still leaving us quite unsettled when it comes to the Atlantic waters. So we've got 100-mile-per-hour winds from Umberto, Category 2, and moving northwest at 17 miles per hour. And then Tropical Storm Imelda checking in at 70 miles per hour, moving northeast at 7 miles per hour. Jesse mentioned that there's some of that rain kind of streaming into the Carolinas, and you can see it right there on our satellite and radar picture. So we'll still see some of these kind of showers spitting into the East Coast regions there across the southeast. That includes Florida, of course, parts of Georgia, the Carolinas through the day today. Otherwise, both of these systems are going to move away from us. So that's the positive news, of course. But we'll still be looking at those coastal areas impacted with the dangerous rip currents, the elevated surf, maybe some coastal erosion across this region. And this goes for really the entirety of the east coast of the United States. So up from Maine all the way down to South Florida, we do have those rip current risks that are going to last. So if you're planning to head to the coast over the next day or so, make sure you're staying out of the water. That's going to be something that lasts with us for a little while longer. Otherwise, both systems are moving away, but note that Imelda likely will move pretty close to Bermuda. So this could mean that we see direct impacts to that island here down the line. But of course, we'll keep an eye on that as we get closer to that time frame. Now, switching gears, moving to the northwest, we've got some systems that are going to push in and leave us unsettled. So umbrella necessary from Washington to California today and tomorrow. You'll see kind of some of those repeated rounds of rain, and we stay in that really cool and damp and essentially breezy kind of forecast for the next couple of days. They'll get some beneficial rain there. You can see those highest amounts closer to the coast, so heads up there. And otherwise, boy, we just are not feeling like fall. We can't find the fall weather, guys. In the Great Lakes, the plains especially, we've got high 80s in the northern plains, low 80s in Chicago, New York at 81 degrees, and October is tomorrow. So it does not feel like October.
Right.
It will continue to feel a little warmer than normal in those
It's also that period where I leave in a sweater and I'm like, this feels great. And then the next time I'm outside,
in sweat.
Yes,
I know.
Makes me cuckoo.
I'm fine with it. I'm kind of like, we get a few more weeks and it'll get cold.
Yeah, I always like to remind people, before you know it, it'll be the dead of winter.
I know, but we got to be on theme, like I want this during
you
Halloween.
Want the pumpkin spice lattes and your sweaters.
Exactly.
Iced.
Thanks, Angie. Exactly.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.